we present this story in a fresh new way, in a very unexpected way, and to peel back some layers on Jesus and do it justice.
The most challenging part of creating the show was definitely picking and choosing which moments you want to use to create one big story as opposed to something that feels like a lot of little stories, and then finding a way to connect all of these memorable events. But also, we want to capture how personal he was and how good of a friend and a teacher he was to each individual person. It's very interesting to have a lead character in a story that doesn't have any flaws, but there are plenty of people around him who have glaring flaws.
This show is bursting with life, adventure, and the unexpected. This is not a retelling of a familiar story at all. The way that we portray some of these miracles is so fun, so adventurous, so whimsical.
This show is going to be bright, colorful, it's going to be exciting. You're going to feel like you're on the adventure with Jesus and with the disciples, and that's exactly what it is. It's an adventure, it's a journey.
So he's a guy that rolled up his sleeves, strapped on his sandals, crossed the stormy sea, climbed a mountain to remind one person how valuable they are to God. And that is the heart of this story. It's a story about love that rescues. It's a story about no matter where you have been in life or where you currently are or where you might find yourself, it's never too stormy, too dark, too ugly, too messy for Jesus to reach down, just like he did with Peter, and grab him by the hand and pull him up out of the water as he's drowning from the woes of life. That's the story. That's the heart of the story. This show, like no other, embodies why we do this at Sight and Sound. And it's our heart that you'll experience this show and that you'll experience Jesus in a way that you never have before, in a different way that's more personal and relational and intimate.
I remember that first morning I went out jogging before breakfast, so I had the quietness of the whole area to myself. There were a lot of water birds flying around and just the very beginnings of the sunrise coming up. But it was just so quiet and so beautiful by the Sea of Galilee. The wide expanse of the water, looking up at the mountains surrounding.
It's probably the most peaceful feeling that I had on the whole trip because it's where the ministry of Christ began. It's where he recruited his disciples. It's where he walked on water. It's where he calmed the storm, healed the lepers and the blind and the sick, and preached the Sermon on the Mount. It's right there. The water, you know, glistening across the sea. These fishermen in boats were out there fishing. You know, they're still doing this 2,000 plus years later.
And yet, in the middle of all that, there was this anticipation of, wow, here we are, and something big is ahead of us.
When we decided to do the show of Jesus, going to Israel was one of the first ideas that the Lord put in my heart. If I'm going to lead this as a team and experience the Holy Lands, this is the show to do that with.
The purpose of this trip was to inspire our design team and some of our story team members in the life of Jesus, but ultimately in what the land of the Bible is.
We're pulling our first all-nighter during the day. So we're running on fumes. We're trying to soak it in. It feels like Southern California. It is beautiful. We're just delirious, and it's kind of quite funny right now. So we had a packed schedule. It was aggressive. We landed in Tel Aviv, and that was after a full night flight. We got into our bus and we headed up to the Mediterranean side of Israel. From there, we traveled from the coastal lands to these highlands toward the Sea of Galilee. It was a beautiful drive, and that's where we spent several days at the Sea of Galilee.
When I first saw the Sea of Galilee, I remember thinking it was smaller.
I didn't expect to see the other side of the Sea of Galilee. I expected it to be almost like one of the Great Lakes.
The fact that it was just surrounded by mountains was just neat. It felt nestled, it felt protected, it felt safe.
The Sea of Galilee is kind of that center point that everything hits and collides. The weather patterns that come from up north and clash with the weather patterns that come from down south. It tended to make sense that you could create in this valley all these waves and this commotion that you read so many times in the scripture about the boats and Christ calming the storm.
One of the big surprises for us over there creatively was it seems as though every reference that we have on the Holy Lands, everything seems so rocky and dusty and dead.
Where it was around Galilee, the landscape is beautiful. Anything north of that is green and lush.
There was a lot of locations that you could immediately tie with the people in the Bible. I remember just spending time walking around Capernaum thinking, well, Peter was here and Jesus was here, and this is a house they would have spent time in, or this was a place that he would have taught.
There were some beautiful motifs in some of the architecture. I'm pretty sure that the artists used some of that in their application to what we ended up putting on the stage.
And the hills behind Capernaum are just blanketed with these yellow flowers.
You have the mustard seeds and the color and the yellow really started to impact story about Sermon on the Mount and how we would help people associate with that location and bring them into that scene.
A big challenge on stage, rolling hills. So what we did was we covered a big portion of the stage with terrain to really give a moment like we would have experienced in Israel that Jesus would have been walking and teaching in.
When you're sitting there in these different locations, you knew that Christ could have been. You look around and you think about the aspects of the hillside or the color of the plant or the birds in the air that he would have referenced to people sitting right next to him.
He used what was around to explain the kingdom of heaven to people who couldn't understand it any other way.
Proximity to things really started to hit home. When you think about all the traveling that you read about in the scriptures, and Christ went from here to here and his disciples followed him, you can kind of put all that into context and think, wow, they really only traveled maybe half a day to here, and it would have been this walk or this mile or this half mile.
Part of the story, particularly that Josh wanted to tell about the travel and walking, and you do get a little dirty walking around, but it's okay because that's just part of what life was like there.
And there was a lot of probably fellowship and teaching along the way.
Yalla. Every time we had to go somewhere and she wanted us to say, come on, or let's go, it was always, yalla.
So we knew when we heard yalla, we had to run and stop taking pictures or go wherever she was leading us.
Let's go. Yalla.
One of the things that I did for myself was I chose to actually go wearing only sandals the entire trip. That was something that I wanted to do for myself and just experience it, because Christ talks about wearing the sandals and cleaning your feet and the foot washing and all of that, and I didn't know what it was going to be like to actually wear sandals for the entire trip, but it really, for me, it impacted me in a deeper way just to walk that way.
From the Sea of Galilee, we went to the Jordan River where Jesus was baptized, and we made our way to Jericho, which was one of the oldest towns that we visited. And then we made our way to the Golden City, which is Jerusalem itself. And that's where we spent the rest of our time.
When I look at the show that we've designed, I'm transported back to Israel through the things that we have designed there. It was very intentional for that fact. And one of those places is the Garden of Gethsemane. Yeah, we have created some beautiful olive trees.
You know, when you look at an olive press being worked and all the ropes tightening around those olives and just squeezing every ounce of liquid from that, every ounce of oil from that, and you think about Jesus, the Son of Man, just being pressed like an olive press in Gethsemane, which means olive press.
Our Israeli tour guide had been talking about, at the very beginning of our trip, she had said, God, please help us as we visit the places where Jesus lived, where he walked, where he was, and most importantly, where he is not. Finally, the day that we arrived at the Garden Tomb, she said, "This is the place where Jesus is not."
You see this sign above the door that says, "He's not here. He's risen."
We patterned the set piece, we're actually calling it the Garden Tomb, after that location. You'll see there's beautiful greenery there because we wanted it to feel as though it's a place of hope and life.
Taking the emotional experience that we had in Jerusalem back to put it on stage became quite a challenge. We wanted to create a story that people could connect to, that wasn't showy and that wasn't in your face, but was much more connected to the miraculous of the moment. And through that, we feel like we can bring them back to that place in time.
It was there that Don Harper, our composer who came along with us, we both stood there and looked at that tomb and more or less crafted the score for that moment right then and there. A lot of times you'll hear, everything including the kitchen sink in the orchestra just pounding and trumpets blaring for this resurrection moment. And we chose to do the complete opposite. And it's just this very peaceful, tranquil, not a lot of musical movement at all for this resurrection.
I think we achieved the goal in creating those experiences together and then being able to follow up on it, coming back and having the conversations around what we experienced together, then impacted story and design and how we collectively were able to bounce back and forth with each other in the development of those ideas.
It brought a ton of camaraderie with the team. It launched incredible conversation.
It helped us with even our timeline for creating the show and our understanding of what we were talking about. Automatically, we could make connections easily between places, between concepts, and how they would impact the storyline that we needed to present on stage.
We were told that experiencing Israel itself while you're there is kind of the fifth gospel. And so when you're experiencing that land, it teaches you so much about the Bible. That was so important for us because we want to bring the Bible to life here, for our design team members and our story team members to experience that actual location. I think it has greatly impacted our shows here, and it's just going to continue to influence our shows in the future.
So when I stepped off that plane and they said, "Welcome home," that was immediately moving. Getting back on the plane and leaving was like leaving home. And so if there's one thing that I know from going to Israel, it's that I'm going to go back, either in this lifetime or the next. We are here in London, where we are recording our latest soundtrack for our newest production, Jesus. This is my third show working with Don Harper. Together we did Joseph and then Moses, and now we're doing the Jesus show. And without us saying it, we know that this is, our most important work together. It's funny, I explained to Don about a year ago, I said, okay, I want it to be whimsical but mature, a mature whimsy. He's like, how do you do that? What does that even mean? I was like, I don't know. But we don't want it to be so heavy-handed, you know, want to have life and adventure in it. And I think we struck it. The emphasis that we put on this particular show and this score has been on a whole nother level. As a director, when you start sinking your teeth into the actual events of the story, and then those events start to get strung together, the character of Christ comes out in every single note and in every single phrase of music and score. And every moment is a significant moment. There's no filler. It's all emotion. It's all passion. It's an incredibly cinematic score. I think this thing tells a story without any lyrics even being attached to it. So that was really our intent the whole time, was let's create something that continually leans forward and that the audience are truly getting something fresh and original and a different angle on this very familiar story. I can't imagine anybody but Don and the London musicians, and recording at Abbey Road Studios. I can't imagine a better place, you know, to have all that come into fruition. Most meaningful and critical points in the process when you assemble everything and put the score together and you record those takes and you hear those woodwinds and you hear those strings and you hear the brass come together so beautifully. It takes you to a whole different place. It's unbelievable. And when music and truth come together, there's nothing more powerful than that, to move people to a place of honest evaluation of what this is all about.